Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The second session today at the LogiMAT supportive program. I'm happy to see all of you. I hope you can all hear me quite well. Everything okay? My name is Michael Henke, and I would like to welcome you to the Forum on Supply Chain Resilience. And today we want to cover this in 50 minutes, how we can move away from the current crisis management to a future management. And I'm not going to do this alone. You saw this on the initial slide. I am representing the Fraunhofer IELL and the TU Dortmund. And I'm really happy to see that two people from practice on board as well, Thorsten Oldfuß and Roland Rosen. I'm going to introduce them in more detail later. We're going to have a 10-minute keynotes, and then we're going to have a discussion here on stage, and you can feel free to chime in. So if you have any questions or have a different opinion than we here up on the stage, then ask the ladies on my right to hand over the microphone and raise your hand, and then you can get the microphone and ask your question to the stage, and we can pick it up and discuss it over here. And we just want to show you that we want to cover supply chain resilience, something that concerns us all, and would also like to add the view from practice and link all of that up to the shop floor topics, which of course are interesting here at the LogiMAT Trade Fair. So unfortunately, we didn't have this issue. It's not a current image here, but it's something I put in deliberately. But we were about to do that. We had serious concerns that at some point in time and during the winter months, because of these many crises that keep us busy, we would come that far, no longer receiving a signal, having energy bottlenecks that are much more dramatic than they actually turned out to be. So the crisis of our times, and I would like to elaborate on that when we talk about crisis management and moving towards a future management, these crises of our times are becoming a new normality. They keep us all busy, and I just brought you a few outstanding examples. You know what it's about: the war in Ukraine, COVID, the trade war between the US and China, things that are almost forgotten. 2 years ago, we had the Evergreen catastrophe, we had the flooding in the Ahrtal Valley, and all kinds of risks of geopolitical kind show us the risks. And all these risks, these accumulated risks, I don't really like that term, but we keep hearing it because one crisis follows another without the first one being over. So these accumulated crises, they hit supply chains that are in an extreme global interconnection. Last year, Manager magazine had the title that we have a global game of roulette in front of us, because just an example of a notebook producer here on the slide, you can show how interconnected these different value chain processes are. Just a simple example that you can probably relate to. Many of you are wearing jeans here today. And if I asked you how many kilometers does one pair of jeans cover from the cotton reap in Central Asia until you can wear it, then you'd probably all say 50,000 kilometers. It's 50,000 kilometers. That's such a crass figure, and it shows us how complex these value-adding processes are today. And the crisis that I mentioned in the beginning, they jeopardize these supply chains because they are trimmed for 100% efficiency. And I just brought you the examples here that I entered here in the global supply chain risks. On the left-hand and right-hand side, you still see natural catastrophes such as snowstorms in the US or in Texas in the winter before last one. Entire companies were at standstill for several days, or missing rain in Taiwan, which had an impact on the chip production, on which we are more and more dependent in the western part of the world and in Europe. The impact of these crises of the last 3 years, ladies and gentlemen, that is the current subject of studies, scientific studies, the complete dimension or the complete impact is not known yet. You know that we have massive impacts and they take several days or weeks even, and we didn't expect that when the COVID pandemic broke out 3 years ago. So here I would like to make this thesis at the beginning of this session that we need to replan our value-adding networks. What we had so far, as far as tools are concerned, didn't help us to manage these crises that I just mentioned, and not in a good way. The reason for this might also be that we weren't quite good at learning from the crisis of the past. Of course, this sheer amount of crisis from the last few years is nothing. Is something outstanding, but it wasn't the first time that we had crises that affected the supply chain. Just think of the volcano in Iceland or the Fukushima catastrophe, and we didn't manage to deal better with these crises. And I hope that all these experience that we've gained from the crisis will help us to deal better with these crises in the future. And Winston Churchill said it in the past, and you might know this quote, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And on the left-hand side, I listed a few success factors that characterize this replanning of these value-adding chains. It's not global or regional, it's both. You have to diversify much more, and we need more transparency, because transparency is important. If we don't have that in these turbulent times, then we're lost. If we have transparency, we can talk about service levels, we can reduce costs, even though we have a new balance of costs and stocks. And I am aware of the fact that in corporate practice, you can't just say, no matter what the costs are, we're just going to stock up inventory and set up other systems to be more resilient. But we have to deal with it more in a different way. Only efficiency will no longer work, but it's also a matter of just in case. And from our point of view, from the scientific view in Dortmund, it's also relatable that I would like to get much more digitalization and automation and autonomization in order to get a grip on these crises. We have more technologies in our hands than we actually use. And these technologies make it possible for us to better deal with these crises than we did in the past. And that's why before this sheer number of crises broke out, we have been setting up a system in Dortmund that I can just outline here on this chart. I'll try to do this briefly. It's a platform, so to say, for platforms. It's the silicon economy, which, of course, this term is not chosen at random, but there's a decisive difference. Silicon Valley stands for C2C and B2C solutions. What we need in Europe and Germany are B2B solutions. And that is especially possible by combining all existing technologies and putting them in relation. And we are managing this even better with this initiative of silicon economy that is funded by politics. You see that in the quote here. We have marketable, usable products that have been developed. And in a nutshell, really, just a quick into the IT architecture here, into basically the machine room of the silicon economy. We have three main technologies that we're using, apart from many other things. That's the Internet of Things, the blockchain technology, and for the optimization of logistics and supply chain management. And we generate an ecosystem for artificial intelligence from that. You have, from the left hand to the right hand side, you see a data collection. You collect a lot of data on the internet, and then you have a blockchain where you save the data, so it's no longer manipulatable. And then you can run blockchains over it, which automatically check the agreed contract parts and then automatically process or initiate the next process step. There are lots of examples how an intelligent trash bin that automatically requests it to be emptied. That's an intelligent file destruction folder. Forgive me for calling it a waste bin. But once the files have been destroyed, the other processes initially is automatically initiated, and everything is done in real time and autonomously and automatically. And that's why it's important that we have data sovereignty and data integrity as keywords here, and that's why we put here Gaia X international data spaces here, which were developed on the German and European level. So this is basically the basis for companies to offer company-specific solutions such as clouds, webs, or proprietary solutions as well. They connect to them. So what we develop is open source software, hardware. That's an approach point for business models, because only if we collaborate on this, we can set up counterpoles to Amazon, Alibaba from Europe to China and the US. And because we're doing this continuously, we're working continuously on these digital transformation processes, and so we're moving further towards a digital continuum. That's the term we use in Dortmund for what we know from the social media channels under the term metaverse, industrial metaverse. We say this term has been used too many times and is not well defined, and that's why we want to use logic that we have continuous processes. So we talk about a digital continuum, processes and value-adding chains autonomously closing again in the sense of a circular economy. And this digital continuum, as I already said, has different versions, extreme ones. First, we have the robotics continuum, and the other one is the supply chain continuum. The robotics continuum and what we're developing there, you can see that at our stand in Hall 1K61 of the Fraunhofer ILM. I don't want to go into more detail here. I just want to transfer to my co-speakers when we talk about resilience, and would like to add something on the other extreme, which is the supply chain continuum. Here we realize exactly what I'm actually demanding, a whole new supply chain management of a new type where the processes and value-adding chains can be closed autonomously in a horizontal, vertical, and timely manner. And the question you might ask yourselves is, how can we move away from the current situation, status quo, where we're still busy with the crisis? How can we move to the future, the supply chain continuum, which, if we look at the next 5 years, was already just sketched out to you. We have many different transformation processes that need to be initiated. Digital transformation, we just talked about flexibilization and ability to change. Sustainability is a big topic, and also resilience. We have to support companies in becoming more resilient. The basis for this is transparency across all nodes in the value add chain. We're doing this with the blockchain technology. And here we have specific use cases that we developed here at our institute. If you're interested, please stay in exchange with me. But for the further process here, we were going to focus on supply chain resilience. And supply chain resilience, and it's something you need to keep in mind, is not only a singular topic, but it's interconnected with the other topics as well. For example, for increasing an economic sustainability. And here we want to make a deep dive into practice, and the first view that we get, or the perspective, will be looking at resilience, and Thorsten Holtus is going to do this. Holtus, I'm going to introduce him quickly before he gets on the stage and talks about his practical life.
He works for Harvey, and he's going to tell us how resilience is being implemented in his company. And with that, I would like to ask the technicians to start the second presentation. I'm looking forward to listening to Thorsten Olthus. He's Managing Director of Harvey Logistics GmbH in Duisburg. He's responsible for supply chain operations. And as a representative of the scientific location in Dortmund, it's really a pleasure that in Dortmund you have studied mechanical engineering, and this is where you started your professional life. It started in 1990 at the Vorwerk Group in Wuppertal, and you worked in different locations. For example, you worked in a production site in Shanghai that you set up, and you started the ramp up there, and then you worked for WLS GmbH, which is a predecessor of the Harvey Logistics company. And after some time in the agricultural sector, you came back to Harvey in 2013 as Managing Director for Operations. And since the beginning of 2021, you're also responsible for supply chain operations for the region Western Europe. you are a person who can do everything himself. So this is going to be a real hands-on view into supply chain resilience. Mr. Althus, the presentation is yours, and we hope we can see the presentation. Well, we hope so. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I was already introduced by Professor Henke with my whole CV. So Harvey Logistics, just a few words about who that is. We are a supply and logistics service provider active worldwide in the field of system gastronomy, filling stations. McDonald's is our most well-known customer. I guess everybody knows them, so you probably know what we are doing. So these are the companies that we deliver each day or supply with food. Well, supply chain resilience, if we take a look at this in more detail, this is a bit more down to earth than Silicon Valley economy and global supply chains and all the things that we already heard about and that my colleague Mr. Rosen is going to talk about. So these are things directed into the future. We are active in the day-to-day business, and every day we have to live this topic. So for us, it is more down to earth. So this is how we set it up. We have 5 different factors. They don't really sound so exciting, like leadership, mindset, employees, clarity of processes, agile IT infrastructure partnerships. Well, this doesn't sound too exciting, too spectacular. These are all things that we've been working on in the last few years. We believe that they play a major role when it comes to resilience. Now let's take a look at leadership, which is very important to all of us, but it's really an important topic when we talk about resilience, when we talk about the world and how it changes, disrupts processes and so on. So the behavior of our management, and to take a look at that and take a look at their reservations or concerns. So not all the managers are so flexible to handle this ever-changing world. And then it also gets difficult for the employees. So how do we want to handle and tackle this topic? You know, creating a guideline and saying, for example, from the shift leader to management, we have the same idea on how to handle a specific topic. Is it really practical, or is it just, you know, empty words? And I believe this is ever more important when we talk about resilience, feedback culture, development talks, fault tolerance. So these are all old topics. I think it is important to prepare the employees. The mindset of employees, well, this is also a very important topic, being afraid of new technologies. I'm a bit older, I've been doing that for quite some time. This is why my CV was a bit longer. And when I hear about young people, everybody tells me they've grown up with a smartphone in their hand, but they often are a bit afraid of when it comes to using using new technologies. For example, if we work in a Teams meeting, and how many people do have some concerns, and even when it just comes to switching on the camera. So there is a lot of work to do. Being able to handle conflicts, how can we do that? How can we act when there is a problem in our way? Well, digital leadership, there are employees we haven't seen for several weeks. They're working from home, but how can we make sure that they still have the mindset of our company, the corporate culture, and still are able to deal with their private surroundings? This is a big challenge. So in COVID, all these private topics also came up. How do we care for our children? These are all topics that we believe also have to do with resilience. Um, Health and occupational safety, being part of decisions, this is much more important than in the past. You can't just say that's the way it is, like in the past. So processes, also a very old topic. Who's responsible for processes? In our company, it's really clear who's responsible for incoming goods, for warehousing goods, and so on. So we have seen that in times of crisis, there are many processes in companies where it's not really clear who's responsible for them. Like, for example, traceability. In our company, it might not be clear who's responsible for it, but it is ever more important. We have to look into that, and we have to make sure that it's clear who's responsible for that. So digitization has always been a topic. We can see that suppliers no longer work the same way they used to work. Maybe customers also have changed. So it is really important that we use standardization. In the past, we often worked with workarounds. When there was a problem with IT, we came up with some sort of turnaround, but it's not something that works in a crisis. Having responsibility on the lowest possible level. This is also a very old topic, but at times when you have to react quickly and things are changing fast, you can't, just set up a working group and wait for their results. We have to go to the level where the decision needs to be taken. And what we can also see, in particular when we look at the management, communication, being open, talking to employees, what's going on. Also the difficult topics that are not so easy to talk about that might be difficult for employees. So you should be open, you should tell them what's going on. You could also say, I don't know what we should do. This is really helping to increase trust. Then IT, which is a bit more concrete. So we have seen that there are contingency teams. For example, we got together in our conference rooms and we did a test or an exercise for an audit. If this case happens, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. Now we have a number of employees only dealing with this topic and implementing things in a practical manner. So we really take a look at failures. So we switch off or can switch off our IT to see what happens. Or if one subsidiary can no longer work because, I don't know, there is a natural disaster, snow, whatever. We just switch it off and take a look at whether our contingency plans are actually working. We also have an emergency kit in each and every subsidiary. There is a laptop which is not part of the laptop. There is a router. You get the information on where to put the router, and within 15 minutes you have a recovery system with which you can work. We have tried that out. Where do we have to put the router to make sure it's connected to the internet? We do backups every 15 minutes of the most important data. We do a lot of IT security trainings, and now we take it seriously. In the past, it was, not taken so seriously, but now it is. Partnerships, supply chains, so markets breaking away. Many customers during COVID, in particular in the restaurant business, had big problems and have a lower volume than before COVID. So, for example, those customers that didn't have a drive-in like McDonald's or some delivery service, they really had a problem. And you have to find different markets, different customers. So, for example, Gorillas, the delivery service that was created in the crisis. And then it could be compensated for. So this is just some information. So we often have to question is the things that we believed in, is that really the case? Can we really do that? We call it supply chain visibility. So vis-a-vis the suppliers, we try to achieve a higher level of visibility. Many customers have reservations. They don't want to publish their data. They don't want to make it so transparent, in particular the technical side. And on the other hand, they think that not everybody's really interested in seeing their supply chain. So, for example, increasing stocks, having the stocks closer to us, maybe setting up new warehousing capacities. This was something, and then venture capital. We actually never thought so much about that, and this is now also an important issue. So these are the topics of how it looks like in real life. Maybe it's a bit disappointing, but it's a bit more down to earth. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Thorsten Oltus, for providing us with this detailed insight into resilience in real life. I think this is really important. This is risk management, and I think some of you will be able to confirm that and are probably going to be able to take something home. So we also said from crisis management to future management, and we also want to take a look into the future. Thorsten Olthus talked about what's going on at the moment, and now we bring both together in the presentation by Roland Rosen, and I would like to introduce him. Roland Rosen studied at the Technical University of Munich. He studied mathematics and started to work in 1989 at Siemens. In the development department, he had different roles, project, team leader, and so on, and he worked in the field of digitization and the digital twin. These are really relevant topics, and for our session in particular, he works now at Siemens as principal research scientist for modeling and simulation. So he's a project leader, and in this project, Roland, you have the role of business owner for the so-called business domain resilience. So precisely what we want to talk about today, and this contains 5 different areas of use or application, and 3 of them focus on the resilience of supply chain, the interaction with the shop floor processes, and this is actually the connection between the supply chain topics that we looked into and also the core of LogiMAT, namely the shop floor processes. Now we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. So the third presentation, please. I'm just going to start. Thank you, Michael, for these comprehensive words of introduction. And in my presentation today, it's the right set of slides, thank you. I would like to give you an impetus for strengthening the resilience of the supply chain and the shop floor. And the strengthening can only be brought about by a combination and a stronger interlinkage between shop floor processes and the supply chain. Of course, what you can see on the next slides are technical solutions, rather. We heard the previous presentation on the human factor. Why are we creating these technical solutions? They're supposed to help people managing their tasks better and with less stress. So, of course, the human being behind this is extremely important, and we want to enable them with it. As was initially talked about, I have different hats here today. First of all, my hat is the Siemens company and contributing to resilience and shop floor management. And also have a Catena X hat here today, where I introduce the initiative. Catena X has now become an initiative and consists of 3 different elements. One is the funding of the Federal Ministry of Economy and Climate Protection. So it's 28 partners which are funded, and with 240 million euros, so quite significant over a period of 3 years. The project will run until July next year. And I'm also going to report from this project later on. We also have a Catena X Automotive Network Association. They are responsible for a long-term support, longer than a funded project, which will run out at some point in time. They're defining use cases for standards in order to do applications for these use cases. And the association also has a certain operator model, and that's the third element, that there will be a set of operating companies for the platform services, for sovereign and fair data exchange along the supply chain partners, and of course also offering applications. And Cofinity X is the first company that was founded last week at the Hanover Trade Fair. Some of you might have been there. The beta phase has been started by the company owner, so we are all invited to take part, and step by step this will take shape. So we're not only talking about future research, but something which is already being implemented for the automotive industry. I will jump over the slide quite quickly. On the left-hand side, you see supply resilience, and that's something that is clear and the problems that came up in the past. and problems that will also be coming up in the future because we're not free of conflict. A huge issue for not only the automotive industry is sustainability. And I'm going to talk to the far right point, the finding or the knowledge that not a single company can resolve this alone, but we need to have a joint effort. And the second field on the right here shows that everyone needs to be integrated in order to resolve this. And if we look at the value chain here, from the presumably small supplier, sometimes in the automotive industry, the supplier can be a huge company, for example, from the chemical industry or the automotive OEM, and then it goes up to the recycling here. Catena X is strongly driven by the automotive industry because it is actually conceived for the automotive industry, but also for the suppliers, so all partners. And this might affect some of you here, including the logistics aspect. BMW and Volkswagen and Daimler are the three big OEMs in the lead, and there are further partners such as T-Systems, SAP, Siemens, and much smaller companies, or ADAC, which is also involved for data. And I want to address one of the use cases here. In Catena Xen, we have 5 different use cases, and some of them are in my business domain. It's about requirements management, capacity management. We have a long-term period, and we also have a real-time exchange of information looking into the delivery capability. And the third use case is called online control and simulation. The aim is to directly involve logistics and go across the supply chain and have a material flow at the very abstract level and realize that. So at every tier level, we have producing companies. Of course, it's not a chain because it's rather a tree and the suppliers get really big. And in the end, we have logistics way paths and that are in between all these producing units. Today, some of the production steps are integrated into the logistics business. In this use case, we have first prototypes already. We're working on standards that make sure what information is transferred from one tier level to the other tier level in this use case, and you are invited to participate. Catena X can be found on the internet. Contact details are listed. You can contact me. We are going to roll it out by first validating it, and then next year we'll have an operational rollout. The idea is that we simulate the material flow in all productions abstractly, and in between we have logistics that we look into, also including the time aspects. And this is just a small application that we called OSIM Manager. The information that you make available from your production or from logistics, for small companies, this can be quite abstract. For producing companies as well, the quintessence is that there needs to be an abstract level here, which has shows the time impact on the material flow, and this will end in a collaboration simulation, and this information will then be able to run different scenarios. What will the impact be on my company if the supplier is delayed or if something happens to the logistics chain? Are there possibilities for my customer to respond variably? And through this collaboration, we have a much more relaxed reaction to change in plans. We have a 2 to 3 weeks of production here. And now this is the core of what I consider a main and essential element towards strengthening resilience. We have the supply chain. We also have the shop floor level with more detailed information, with everything that needs to be integrated. To strengthen the resilience here, we need clear use cases. I already presented one abstract use case. It needs to be beneficial for everyone, then everyone will share information and data if there is a shared benefit. And all of that is supposed to relate to data sovereignty. So I know as a small company what happens to my data. They're not misused. And sometimes not by the automotive OEMs, which are often considered as evil from the outside because they use smaller suppliers. That's not true, but we need to have collaborative solutions and work on them as a company and a partner, and in the future also as part of a manufacturing X environment, which was officially started last week in order to boost resilience. Of course, there's lots of different topics, but I don't have time to cover that today. So thank you very much. And Michael Thorsten, I'm looking forward to our discussion and our questions.
Thank you very much, Roland. Please take a seat. Well, as I have already announced, we are going to talk here on the panel, and of course you can ask your question. So if you have a question right away, then I would like to answer your question first. If this is not the case, we would start, and maybe this triggers a question. Thorsten, Roland, in the recent past, I often came across the question of why we were not able to do that in a better way. I've already given the answer. Maybe we didn't learn enough, but resilience is actually not a new topic, not for application-oriented research, nor for real life. But why in the last 3 years have we painfully seen that resilience in the supply chain has not come so far? Well, I think in the last few years, everything was there in excess. If you needed a new employee, you said goodbye to the old one and hired a new one. If you didn't like your supplier quality-wise or price-wise, you just found a new one. So the market was there. There were enough people on the supply side. So we said, okay, we need to be more economically efficient. We never asked ourselves what happens if it no longer works. Now we have all these external influences. There is this interruption, and we're all standing there, and we ask ourselves, what next? And I think you said that 20 years ago you looked into this in research, and you already had all the insights that we have today, but probably nobody needed that. So this is at least my impression. I guess the pressure wasn't high enough. And the number of crises, one following the other, is really unique. Roland, what's your opinion? Well, resilience is something like health. It affects all of us and affects us always, and you can always do a bit more. And the topic of health is more important when you're ill, because then you focus much more on it, and in between another topic might be more important. So resilience in the past few years, because of these sad reasons, was much more in the focus. So we have to focus on that. You can't say, okay, my health is done and I can stop worrying about it. You can't measure it. It's like the Richter scale, and it's open at the top. We can't say resilience is over for us as a company or an industry. This is going to be a topic that is always going to accompany us. So in the near future, we're probably going to need that. I'd like to come back to that point, Roland. You said we can measure it. But how can you then assess whether you have a necessary level of resilience? Well, there are no absolute values. When it comes to resilience, I can maybe have some KPIs when I take a look at my supply chain, when I take a look at my suppliers. And I can also connect resilience with, let's say, product carbon footprint information, like, for example, how many sustainable suppliers do I have in my supply chain, and can my suppliers do that in a time span that's necessary for me. And there might be some KPIs, maybe I didn't phrase that correctly, but there is no absolute value. I can't say I have 100% health or whatever percentage. There are lots of factors that come into play here. This was a bit of a correction to what I said earlier. Well, it's actually our customers that measure that. We don't need KPIs. It's the customers that reflect that back to us. They expect from us to solve these problems. And this is actually the KPI. So whether we are able to do that or not, well, nobody really asks how we're going to do that. The question is, can we do it or can't we do it? So the requirements are higher, but we don't have a value for that. We just react. So this is not acting, 80% reactive, I would say, and 20% proactive. So I think we need to have a better ratio here. It's too new. Well, this is a very pragmatic approach to say if our customers are happy, this is the most important point for us. But I would like to ask once more, I mean, it's just the two of us or the three of us and a few people in the audience. Do you think you're sufficiently resilient, or does Siemens, I'm not asking the Catena X representative, but the Siemens representative, does Siemens offer solutions to make you more resilient in the future? Because we have said you can never do too much. It's just like with health, you want to do totally healthy and totally resilient. Well, I think the topic is covered in our company up to 80–90%. I would say in the heads and minds of our employees, probably half of that, regarding the technology and the openness. When it comes to the partners, I would say 10%. Customers in our business, I would say 100%, but this is our history. But when it comes to suppliers, probably about 10%. Well, such a system sounds nice, and I think there have been some attempts in the past. The question always is for the user, or the first question is, how much does it cost? Who's going to operate it? Who's going to create the standards? This is something that has to do with the past. This is always the question. Is it for automotive? Is it for other lines of industry? How realistic is it? When can we use it? So this is really difficult to, get a grip on. And coming back to Catena, well, if there are three big automotive OEMs which have a certain power in Germany, in Europe, worldwide, if they go together and say, this is the approach that we would like to pursue, a setup with a, let's say, a subsidy project with open source solutions on the website, on the network. We have applications that are compatible, so open source software applications and commercial ones, for example, from companies like SAP or Siemens. This, I think, is an ecosystem which makes sense. So this is an approach that has found feedback all over the planet and can be a guiding principle. And coming back to what you mentioned earlier, this was done with the support of the German government to expand it to other lines of industry like mechanical engineering and into the industry. It's probably not so easy because we don't have such a big automotive company like Volkswagen, because we have many more layers, but I think it's going into the right direction. And I hope that our company will also provide some support, some help. We have applications on how a supply chain works. Other companies do that as well. So I believe that we can start the discussion, and there should be a better communication basis from the shop floor to the supply chain and back. So we need compatible data models, semantic models. We also need the standards, the mechanisms for that. We have quite a lot of things in our bag. One say March, the other say OPC UA. So we have to connect that. We can do that only together. So this is what we are working on. So this is my impetus. It's not 100% working yet, but it's not the case that it isn't working either. So this is something we need to work on. Okay. I'm quite sure that the discussion is going to go deeper later on when we're having a coffee together. But I would like to ask if somebody from the audience has a question. You can just ask us a question and we're going to answer it. Oh, yeah. Okay, you just have to wait long enough. There is a gentleman here. Okay, so now the ice is broken. Hello. Metzler from Schnellex Logistics. We're quite strong in the automotive segment as contract logistic a company for OEMs. Do we have to wait for systems like Catena are going to check the systems for their health? Health check, well, I wouldn't say it this way. First of all, you are invited to participate in that, and we can talk about that later on, or you could contact the association. I believe it is an offer. I think it is a fair offer to everyone. Just like we said earlier, information being distributed faster if it works better. And I know that from one of our partners. He said there are lots of people who make phone calls or use the fax machine, uh, even if there are IT solutions. And if you are part of that as a logistics person, it's going to help your processes. So I am sure and optimistic, and this is also the view of the automotive companies. It's not about, squeezing the last drop out of the suppliers. I think it's important to make these use cases, to participate in that. But of course, there's something that needs to be discussed. There is an invitation in the respective bodies and forums that are taking place. I'm sure that this topic is going to continue. That was a great question. You actually are asking better questions than the facilitator. So if there is someone else who would like to ask a question, just shoot. I have already seen the 5-minute card. So we could talk about another topic to round this discussion off. Well, we said from crisis to future management. And now we, I think, talked about crisis management. We talked a bit about the future. But I would like to know what are the next steps. So going from crisis management to future management, starting with you, Torsten. I think it's in small what Roland talked about the big picture. So we are automotive, and the supply chain like McDonald's, of course, is still quite demanding. Amazon, Procter Gamble are usually on top before the automotive companies. We also have to see, and I think the awareness has improved. So with regard to our suppliers and the transparency that we do the forecast planning so that we get the information from the suppliers. So the willingness has improved because of all these crises, but there's still work that needs to be done if you want to achieve this openness in the supply chain. And this brings me back to the question from the audience. So this is what you need to deliver, you're not going to get it back? Or is it really a relationship based on partnership? So the technical solution is one thing, which is quite challenging. It's going to work, but to really create this awareness among the people to be open and then to take a look at who gets the benefit from all of that. This is the point where we are talking to individual suppliers to make progress. So if I interpret that, I would say technology for resilience, sustainability, and so on. This is what we already have. We have to use it. And the use, as always, depends on the culture, the company, the mindset of the people who are willing to participate in that or not. This is a huge part. This is an important component which we shouldn't neglect. Roland? Well, I suggest we do together. Challenge the partners and service providers, the application providers, and I would like to invite you to do that because together we will be able to improve the level of resilience. Thank you. Well, so you see that I'm already getting up again. So there is nothing I can add. So thank you very much. I would like to thank the two of you for taking the time to hold the presentation here in this session. I think we are going to spend a nice lunch together. And I would like to summarize what we heard so far as follows. And I think you already did that in your second to last answer. We should have a better exchange between shop floor and supply chain in both directions. This should be on the done on the with the exchange of data and information in real time and on the basis of standards. And we should not always ask the regulators to do that, but when we have developments and at Dortmund, we can create standards, and I think this is going to play a much bigger role in the future. And if you're interested in all of these topics, please stay in touch with the three of us, and you can find us on LinkedIn or the other networks. And we're also going to stay here for a couple of minutes, so you can come to us and start a discussion. I would like to thank the two of you. I would like to thank you and the audience for staying with us for so long and even asking a question. And with that, I wish you a good lunch break and a fruitful LogiMAT 2023. Thank you.